Hello and welcome back into another episode of The Hard Fowl. I'm your host, Pearson Fowler. With me as always from GamecockCentral.com, Collyn Taylor. This is the weird episode.
Yeah, the weirdest of weird.
The weirdest of weird, not just because it's a postseason edition. And we're going to get to a lot of postseason things, although frankly, I don't know if we're going to get to like a real like season wrap-up player by player. You've done a lot of that on Gamecock Central in terms of going through player grades for the season and things like that. I don't even know if we're going to get to that today because there are plenty of other things that have happened in the world of sports, particularly college basketball, and both South Carolina basketball coaches have had a lot to say about the issue. I should also point out that for the first time since you and I started recording this podcast, I'm sitting down.
Yeah, this is, the severity of the situation if you're sitting down for this podcast.
I know, I feel like this is like a, it's like a 60 minutes or something now.
This is like a, a Dateline 20 for 20.
Yeah.
E60.
I'm a little bit uncomfortable, but I'm also kind of tired. We're recording this. Right now it is 9:17 on Thursday morning, and this time next week, we were planning on having an SEC basketball tournament. I was sitting at my desk. I was going back and refreshing myself on the first South Carolina-Arkansas game, trying to see what I could learn from that game that I could maybe apply to a prediction for what was going to be last Thursday night's game. And then we found out there's going to be no more basketball tournament. Before we get into that, you have a really nice breakdown, rundown of everything that happened in Nashville with the SEC canceling their basketball tournament, along with the rest of the sports world shutting down. But we're quarantined right now. You and I are actually in person. Yesterday, Wes and Chris and I were remote. I don't know if we're 6 feet apart, but we're sort of practicing social distancing. Yeah. Well, what's it been like for you, other than kind of strange?
Exhausting.
Exhausting?
This week, not so much. Last week, that was that like 36-hour stretch when we got to Nashville was some of the most exhausting time I've had as like a sports writer. Like that and like the baseball coaching search, just how quick that kind of came together late. It was nuts.
But what's like your day? Because you work from home already a lot. I mean, obviously you go to press conferences, you go to sporting events. That part of it, I guess, hasn't changed because you're still working from home. Are you going stir crazy yet? Like, are you watching something to occupy your time, or have you been as busy as ever?
I mean, a lot of it right now is kind of same. Nothing's really changed because you're doing wrap-up stuff. You're trying to talk to recruits and get as much information as possible. And this right now, it's different. Talk to me in May when the stuff we've done now kind of dries up and you're entering the summer months, which are always slower. Talk to me then, and we'll see what happens. But, it's pretty normal right now.
Do you have anything like on a list somewhere when everything does get slow when basketball season? Because, I mean, there's still a lot of basketball season stuff going on, and you're doing a lot of that. As you mentioned, you're wrapping up the season, and we're going to have some news probably about at least one Gamecock making a decision one way or the other with what he's going to do with the rest of his career. So you have all that stuff coming up. Are you looking forward to, like, is it nice to have a respite? Like, do you have a bunch of TV shows and movies that you've been meaning to watch and haven't had a chance to, and now you'll get a chance to?
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. I actually get to spend time with my fiance. I get to, I have nights and weekends back. It's weird. And I was looking forward to the respite a little bit because I was like, I'll be able to go out and, eat dinner and go see movies. Yeah, now I can't do any of that, though. And now I can't do any of it. Yeah. So it's a little weird. We're watching a lot of Netflix, watching a lot of, and there's no sports to watch. Mm-hmm. So it's like you have to watch movies and you have to watch TV shows.
Or old sports.
Yeah, I can't do that.
No?
I can't watch old sports.
Results-based? Like you already know what happens?
Yeah, and no, if it's like, I grew up a Cub fan, so if it's Game 7 of the World Series in 2016, a little different.
Yeah, you can watch that again.
But, no, just like, Panthers, Bucks from 3 years ago or whatever, no, can't watch that.
Okay, all right. Good to know. Yeah, I watch like old stuff. Like on Sunday, I watched a lot of the Game 6 of the NBA Finals, Lakers and Sixers from 1980, and that was cool. I know that the Lakers won the title in 1980. I don't remember specifically how Game 6 went. I know now. I won't spoil it for any of you that want to watch that on like NBA TV or something like that. But I'm mostly. Well, I haven't even picked out a show to start binge watching yet. I've watched a couple movies. I'm still kind of trying to figure out what exactly to do because it's so surreal and like adjusting to not having sports. And then the weird part for me is still having like a ton of NFL stuff because like that hasn't stopped. That hasn't
the
hasn't
NFL
changed
never
even
stops.
remotely. It never stops.
It's going to be weird. We're recording this currently 9:22 on a Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
Long about noon today, it's going to feel weird.
Noon today?
'Cause
Oh, yeah.
it would have been the first day of the tournament.
Yeah. If you exclude the play-in games, which you're correct to do.
Yeah. Today would have been weird because this would have been the first 2 days of the tournament, man, are just so fun.
Mm-hmm.
And
there's nothing like it in sports. I mean, it's the most valuable property of the NCAA for a reason.
Yeah.
Because everybody loves it.
Yeah. And today we'd probably be talking about an NIT game. If we're going to be completely honest, we'd be recapping an NIT game. So it's been weird. It's been exhaustingly weird is the best way I could put it.
And for us, like obviously we talk mostly about Carolina basketball, and we will get into that because as you mentioned, maybe playing an NIT game right now or something like that. Like I haven't even thought about that. I haven't even thought about the Carolina basketball season. We are going to talk about, big picture, what does it mean to have a season cut short where you're right, like Carolina probably wasn't going to make the NCAA tournament, but they could have.
Yeah.
They could have made a run in the SEC tournament. Like all
Yeah.
those things are still on the table, and it's it basically just comes down to are you a glass half full or glass half empty kind of person. It's just been so completely surreal. I feel like this changes a lot, and I feel like this changes nothing in some ways because everything changes so much. Maybe like ends up leveling the playing field for all the teams. It's completely unprecedented. I don't really know how to feel about it on like a big picture or like with South Carolina specifically, but I guess that's what we're going to try to unpack today. What sort of all this means. All right, so quarantine life started, really over the weekend.
Yeah.
But like I said, this time last week was about the time the NBA was suspended last Wednesday. That was the first big domino to fall. And then Thursday is when pretty much everything else got canceled. Friday was for like the couple of holdouts. You were not in Nashville when South Carolina canceled the SEC tournament, but you're about to head up there?
No, I was up there.
Oh, you were up there.
I lived it.
Okay,
Yeah,
I thought
it.
so.
I lived it.
I thought you were, and then when we were sitting in the bullpen, you made it sound like you hadn't
No,
left
no,
yet.
no, no,
Or you just
no.
mean you hadn't left for the arena?
No, I was there. This was today's. I thought today was Tuesday for a second.
Yeah.
No, today was. Yeah, I was there. I lived it. It was insane.
All right, so walk me through your day.
Yeah. Okay. So we get up there on Wednesday, and Wednesday you're driving and you're checking, social media and kind of keeping track of it, and you're starting to think, okay, maybe they won't play with fans. Maybe you're still going to get the tournament in, but it's going to feel weird. It's going to be different. So,
And to be fair, sorry to interrupt,
yeah,
it was already weird in Nashville, having recently been devastated by the tornadoes, and a lot of the
Yes.
proceeds for the SEC tournament were going to go
Yeah.
towards supporting parts of the community that have been particularly ravaged. So it's already, I imagine, a little bit of a weird atmosphere.
yeah. And so you get up there, and I park, and I'm walking to the arena, and then we get the email about Mike Kotsar. And it's like, okay. So you get all this coronavirus stuff going on, and Mike Kotsar's hurt, and
Yeah, hurt his right arm, right elbow.
popped out of
in
place.
practice.
And yeah, it's just boom, boom, boom. And you're like, geez. And so you're covering that, and then they had open practice. And so you're sitting there at open practice, and, I'm standing with Ben Briner of the state, and we're just talking, and all of a sudden you get the news that the NCAA tournament's going to be held without fans. And so then you're starting to get the idea, okay, like, we're still going to play the SEC tournament, but there's no way the SEC tournament has fans. And, I was, for as weird as it was, I was kind of looking forward to just that, where it's like, okay, that it's going to be interesting. I'm intrigued by it. And South Carolina practices, and you kind of write your stuff off that, and you talk to Frank Martin, and they have made, I think, 4 players available. So you talk to them and say, what do you feel like it's going to be like if we have to play without fans, or if this or if that?
And what was the consensus?
It was like it's going to be weird. It's going to be like playing AAU games, early AAU games, and you're like, yeah, because there's going to be like 4 people there in the stands.
And then someone to give you a bunch of money right after the game.
Yeah, a bunch of shoes filled with coins. Yeah. And then so we write all of our stuff. You check in your hotel. You you unpack. I mean, you're expecting to be there for at least 2 days. So you unpack the stuff you need. And there were 3 media people there from South Carolina that night. So we all go out to dinner. And while we're at dinner, we're on our phones, and we refresh it, and the NBA suspends its season. And then Rudy Gobert tests positive. And then the Fred Hoiberg stuff happens. You know, we're sitting there at a bar on Broadway watching Arkansas Vanderbilt, and Hoiberg slumped on his chair, and you're like, I think I was the first one to say it. I was like, they're not going to play the NCAA tournament. They're not going to play the NCAA tournament. Meanwhile, little did I know, South Carolina's in their scouting report meeting, and Bruce Shingler's saying the exact same thing. He's saying, there's no way we're playing. There's no way we're playing. And lo and behold, we kind of write your stuff. You schedule all your stuff out for that morning. And it's about, so the 3 media people meet for breakfast. We go and we leave, get in our cars, and not 2 minutes later, we're literally merging onto the highway. And this week comes out that the SEC tournament's canceled. So
it sounds like you kind of saw it coming, though.
You kind of read the writing on the wall.
Yeah, if you thought the NCAA tournament was going to get canceled, you must have thought that.
Yeah. You just didn't know when it was going to happen. You didn't know if they were going to try to get through these games, if they were going to cancel later, or how it was going to work. And then all of a sudden, you're checking out of hotels because there's no reason to stay in Nashville. So you sprint back to your hotel, check out. You get to the arena, see what's going on there. You're texting SIDs and media relations people and saying, is Frank going to talk to the media? What's your plan? The team has been scrambling since about 8 a.m., 8:30 a.m. to try to get planes home.
Do you know when they found out?
They found out that morning.
Mm-hmm.
Frank said he woke up and had an immediate call with the commissioner and the National Association of Basketball Coaches and all that, and kind of they decided to cancel and suspend recruiting.
So Frank Martin, was he in on that decision? Did they call the coaches and say, hey, do you think we should cancel this or go forward with this? And the coaches said we should cancel it, or were the coaches just told this is being canceled?
It was kind of like, this is being canceled. What do you think? Kind of thing. And
Mm-hmm.
Frank kind of commended Sankey for doing what he had to do. And then the team kind of found out. I talked to their director of basketball ops for a story on Central, which I thought turned out pretty well. It's a good behind-the-scenes piece. They were calling, so I didn't realize how this worked. Each team contracts with a private charter company, and that's how you deal with it. It's not just like you have a plan on retainer. I knew they probably didn't have a plan on retainer, but I didn't know the ins and outs, and so they have to call. It was about 8:30. They're calling around saying, hey, just in case this officially gets nixed, when can you have a plane to us?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Andy Astley, who's really good at his job, was not the only person who was calling about this. And so the way it worked was they were sitting there trying to figure out, well, if this team's flying from here to Florida, how quickly can we get to Nashville? If we can get it from the Northeast to Nashville, and it was pandemonium. They ended up getting a flight out at about 3, so they left the hotel at 2, got to the airport, and got into their charter, and home by 6. And we talked to Frank about, I want to say 1:30, 1:45 local. Got lunch and rode for 5 hours and got home. I got home about 12:30 midnight and crashed and woke up and did it again the next day.
When did it feel real?
It didn't. I don't think it still has.
Yeah, still.
It's weird. Like, you look back on that time and you're in the middle of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're watching all these conference tournaments on Twitter get shut down, and you're like, well, hell, I'm right in the middle of this own conference tournament getting shut down. It's amazing. It's amazing in all the weird ways.
Yeah.
And that's it. It's taken some getting used to, the fact that, like, if I had a night free, I would just turn on and find a random college basketball game on, or a random whatever game, and now you don't have that, and now you're trying to figure out there's no media availabilities. There's no recruiting to talk about. I mean, there's recruiting to talk about, but you can't go watch a kid and talk to him. You can't, whatever. And it's kind of nuts.
Yeah.
It's really nuts.
It's completely nuts. I was listening to Chris Vernon, basically just share his thoughts on the situation. And he was like, basically, since as long as I can remember, he's like, I don't think I've gone more than like 3 days without watching a sporting event. And I was like, that seems kind of crazy. Like, I may have gone 3 days, but I hadn't thought about it like that until he said that. And I was like, I don't know when the last time I went a week without watching like some form of a sporting event was.
Yeah.
It's just such an integral part of our lives. And, at that point, that's kind of the first thing that we're thinking about. Like, you were in Nashville. We were here in the studio doing it live and getting the updates and looking at each other and going, wow, like this is really, I was like, great, Carolina can't lose to Arkansas. This is great news.
Yeah.
But the immediate reaction is just like, what do we do without sports? What does this mean? But
I went numb for a little bit. Like, for about 10 seconds after getting the tweet from the SEC, you kind of go numb for a second. And you're like, holy crap, did they just do that? And it's unprecedented. It's so weird to think that, they just canceled everything. They just pulled the plug on everything without knowing when it's going to come back. You don't know. Like, it could be end of April. It could be beginning of June. It could be next September. Like, you don't know.
Well, and even still now, we have to start thinking about all the other. That's like the first thing. It's like, when does it come back? Like, what does it mean for the season? And then you start to think about what are all the other implications for, the athletes that had their seasons cut short. Like, when was the first time you thought about that implication for Mike Kotsar, or got to talk to Mike about it?
We haven't got to talk to Mike about it. Still.
But like, when does that part of it sink in? Was that not until Friday? Or did you think about that immediately?
It was pretty early. Your first thought was, holy crap. Your second thought was, what's my next step? So you execute that, and then as you're doing all this stuff, you're like, well, Mike Kotsar might never play basketball again. He's probably going to have a shot to go pro, but Mike Kotsar, legitimately, there are people who were going into conference tournaments knowing this was their last ride, and to get that ripped out from under them kind of sucks. So
yeah, that part of it that's been a really complicated part of the conversation.
Yeah.
We had a lot of people that are calling in saying that, what about these athletes? You feel so bad for them. Did you really have to cancel it? Could you have played it in front of an empty arena? Like, this means so much to these kids. And then there are people that'll subsequently call in and say, how dare you think about this? This is just sports. This is just a game. There's bigger things at stake. And I posted something on the Insiders Forum. I don't remember if it was a thread that you started. I don't know. Somebody, I thought I was tagged anyway, somebody tagged me in something and brought that up. And I was like, yeah, anybody that's telling you that the way that you're feeling about this is wrong is an idiot, and don't listen to that person. And in fact, step on their toes or, pull their hair or something, like, not like devastating in terms of like an injury, but like really annoying.
Yeah.
Pinch them, something like that. St. Patrick's Day was earlier this week, do something like that, because that's the exact wrong way to think about that. And that's just, that mentality is just disgusting because, first of all, as we both mentioned, sports are an integral part of what we do, not just because it's our careers, but because it's something we're passionate about. So it's okay if we feel sad about that.
And there's
it's
a lot
also
of people
okay.
passionate in society about it. It's a major part of pop culture.
It's one of the few things that like really consistently draws people together, especially anymore as everything becomes more and more bifurcated. But even apart, it's like there's a communal element to it.
Yeah.
But I think it's very legitimate to feel a lot of pain for these people. Now, with Mike Kotsar, like, he's gotten to play in the NCAA tournament. He's gotten to play in a Final Four, and odds are he wasn't going to get to do that again. But he was still, he had in his head a different way that this was going to end in terms of his South Carolina career. He didn't get to really relish his last opportunity on the court, and not just because Carolina lost that awful game to Vanderbilt, because in his head that wasn't his last game. You're going to treat your last game differently if you know for sure it's going to be your last game, and not only for Mike, but for the guys that are one and done, or for the seniors that were maybe going to make the tournament this year, but and like never had. like that's a huge loss for them. And I hate when people say, well, it's just sports, it's just a game, it doesn't matter. Because for those kids, they've probably been dreaming about that since the time they could walk. Yeah. And this could have been their one opportunity to, play in the SEC tournament or to play in the NCAA tournament. In these events they've been watching their whole lives, and it's just gone. And I think it's okay. And in fact, I think it's right and normal and good to feel bad and to feel empathy.
Yeah. I mean, I feel bad for those guys. Like, I understand that this is bigger than sports, and I'm not sitting here complaining about, well, no, I have nothing to write about. I might jokingly complain about it on Twitter, but like, I get it. Like, I get that you want to treat, this with some severity to try to get out ahead of the storm a little bit. And I feel bad for these kids because this is what they've worked for. And it's so different. And you and I played sports and did that growing up. And you had the ability to go out, not necessarily on your own terms, but you understand when the finality is there. You understand, okay, I'm getting close to the end, and I need to have some closure. And whether that's losing in the SEC tournament for, a Georgia team that, Georgia lost in the first round, or Ole Miss, whoever lost in the first, Vanderbilt. Let's just say Vanderbilt. Those seniors on that team know they weren't going to go to the NCAA tournament. No, they weren't going to go to the NIT. They knew that when they lost in the SEC tournament, that was it for them. Whether that's a senior playing his last college basketball game, whether that's, Aaron Neesmith who didn't play but is probably going to go pro. You kind of had some finality to it. Even if you're, let's say, Missouri, and Missouri, you weren't going to go to the NCAA tournament this year, and you weren't going to the NIT, barring something insanely unforeseen. You don't get that finality. You go in thinking you're mentally preparing yourself for, okay, this is it. I know that when we're done here, my season's over, or my career's over for the seniors. You don't get that. And it's okay to feel bad for those people. And it's okay to understand, like, damn, that really sucks. And if you're South Carolina, I'll tie it back to that, and Frank's kind of talked about it, you leave with what if. Were they going to win the SEC tournament? Probably not, but you never know.
Were they going to, beat Arkansas 50-50? Like, even that is, like, if they beat Arkansas, then they're a lock for the NIT, right? With 19 wins and the quality wins. If they lose to Arkansas and you're 18-14 or 18-13, whatever they would have been, maybe it's a little more up in the air. I don't know exactly how the NIT seeding or selection works, but there's so many question marks. And let's use that to transition into the season as a whole for South Carolina. What do we do with the season?
Yeah.
It was after the Vanderbilt loss. You did it. I did it on my show. We did it on this podcast. Relitigated the entire season.
Yeah.
Okay, it was a disappointing season because you lost to Vanderbilt and you lost to Stetson and you lost to Boston. And if you won all those games, then Carolina would have been prime for a tournament spot. Sure.
Yeah.
You also beat Kentucky. You beat Clemson on the road. You beat
Virginia on the road. Arkansas on the road. Yeah,
people have heard us say that a million times. And it was just about, how do you spin it? What do you do with all this? What is the totality of this season? Is it disappointing because you had the high highs and it was offset by these unacceptably low lows? Or do you say, hey, it was another winning season in the SEC. It was another winning season overall. South Carolina still got a bye in the SEC tournament. They were a top 6 team in the SEC. Your stat was amazing. Tied for third in the last 5 years for SEC wins, just behind Florida and Kentucky, and tied with Tennessee. That's incredible, given their preseason expectations. Predicted to finish, whatever it was, 11th or 12th in the SEC, and to finish 6th. All those things, subjective measures in their own right, because it's people voting in different capacities on what they think South Carolina's going to do, at least in terms of the preseason predictions. The wins are the only measurable objective part of that, but that ends up being a good season. And it was all going to be contingent on what happens at the end. That's how we do things. We litigate based on results. And I think that's problematic. And in this case, it's impossible because now we don't have results. And that's sort of what I'm getting to. But if South Carolina had made a run and made the NCAA tournament, it would have been a great season. And Frank Martin would have made the NCAA tournament twice in 8 seasons. And everyone would have been like, cool, you're on track and you're still returning a lot of this young core. And you should probably make the tournament
Yeah.
At least once in the next couple years with all these young players. This is great. If Frank Martin makes the NIT, the conversation's a little bit more complicated. It's like, okay, well, you still only made one NCAA tournament in 8 seasons, but you've made the postseason 3 times in the last 5 years, and you're still returning this young core. And so NIT this year, NCAA tournament next year, then you're talking about 4 and 6 postseasons and 2 NCAA tournament runs in 9 years and all this stuff, and everything still feels a little bit on track, although not quite as solid, obviously, as if you make the NCAA tournament. And if Carolina hadn't made any postseason play, then here come the Frank haters with their
1-8. What is 1-8?
Forks and
Pitchforks.
torches and pitchforks.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Torches and pitchforks. Trying to run them out of town, and it's like, well, this is sort of your last chance. You got this young talent, and you didn't do it this year because you messed it up because you lost these games you weren't supposed to lose. What are you going to do next year? That's kind of the put up or shut up year. And not that I'm a torches and pitchforks for Frank kind of guy, because I don't think Carolina's going to get anybody better. But I was always sort of in the camp that with this young core, with the team that Frank has said is his most talented team at South Carolina, and we've all observed is probably his most talented team at South Carolina, you probably got to make the NCAA tournament at least once with that bunch of guys. But now we have no idea. And there are going to be people that say, well, I think Carolina was primed to make a run. Mike Kotsar's elbow was going to be fine. He was going to play. I don't know if that was possible or what the status was. Right. But yeah. But you're going to be people that say, oh, well, this is AJ Lawson was just heating up. He was going to have.
You get to play the what if game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On both sides of it, in both extremes. And given how, and not in flux, but how much this season was already kind of this season was kind of a Rorschach test for like, what kind of fan are you? What are your expectations? How do you feel about this basketball team? Yeah. Given that there was already so much ambiguity about the season and so many different interpretations, it becomes now infinitely more complicated by the fact that there was an end to the season because it's not currently happening. Yeah. But there was no end to the season.
It's unceremonious. It's as unceremonious as it comes. You get to play the, well, what if South Carolina beats Arkansas? What if South Carolina beats LSU? Like, 2 teams that they played, they beat Arkansas and they played LSU pretty close, especially late. What if they go in and beat them? Then you're playing Auburn or whoever, or A&M or whoever. Like, what if? And, what if they get to Saturday? What if they get to Sunday? Because they had the talent to do it. Don't get me wrong. They had the talent to be a top 4 team in the SEC this year. And what if, Justin Minaya comes back and he plays up to the level he was before.
He played really well in the Vanderbilt game, by the way, in like 15 minutes.
Yeah, and they were playing really well with him in the lineup before he got hurt. You're not going to have a sense of finality to this season. You're just not. And you're, whatever, like you said, it's a Rorschach. Whatever fan you are, it's going to be, well, what if South Carolina got to Saturday, got to Sunday, and got to be a number 2 or 3 seed in the NIT? How deep could they have gone? What if, and then on the other side, well, what if they just lost to Arkansas and then lost their first game in the NIT? What if? And then you can shift the argument to however you want to shift your argument, because it's a choose your own adventure at the end of the year. It's a choose your own adventure at the end of this year, and no season should end like that. And I get why they did it, and I completely understand, and I'm not bashing the NCAA or the government or whoever, but I'm just saying it sucks because you won't get the closure you need to get for this year. It's going to take a long time for me to process the end of this year. I can only imagine how hard it's going to be to process it if you're on that coaching staff or in that locker room.
Yeah. I mean, this entire season is obviously going to be an asterisk, and obviously not just for South Carolina and not just for college basketball. It's all sports. It's going to be that weird 1994 MLB season where, I mean, that was even different because it was like, okay, well, that's a labor dispute. Like, that was avoidable. Like, that's your own damn fault.
Yeah.
But there are going to be some people that say, well, you just throw the season out. And I don't think that's the right answer because you played almost all of a season.
Every team played 30 games. Yeah. You just don't have a champion.
So, and I, like I said, we like to just determine how good or bad something is based on the result and not look at the process, because it's easier to do that. It's cleaner. Did you make the NCAA tournament? Yes, good season. Did you make the NCAA tournament? No, bad season. It's never that cut and dry.
No.
And I think the hardest part about this is that ambiguity makes people uncomfortable. Now people have to really make their own assessment.
You have to critically think about it.
Yeah, there's no like objective metric for just like, okay, well, was this a good season? Was this a bad season? Based on these, I mean, not entirely arbitrary, but somewhat arbitrary measures. What do you think?
I think it was a pretty okay season. Are we going into our season postmortem kind of a little bit?
Yeah, kind of. Without necessarily maybe even getting specifically into players, but just like big picture, like it was a good year for Carolina. Can it be a good year and a disappointing year?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you could say that I'm of the opinion that good things can happen and bad things can happen. You shouldn't have lost to Stetson. You shouldn't have lost to Boston at home, even though Boston did make the NCAA AA tournament. Probably still shouldn't have lost to him. Definitely shouldn't have still lost to him. You win that game. You win the Stetson game, which you should have won 100%. There's no ifs, ands, buts about it. They were
still weird.
They were terrible.
That's what you need to do during quarantine. You need to get back and watch that game and come back and explain to me what happened.
Wrong?
I have no idea.
You shouldn't have lost to Vanderbilt on the road. If you want to play revisionist history, you can say they win those and they're 21-10. Go into the SEC tournament, probably needing just one win to make the NCAA tournament. You're 22-11 with those quality wins and no bad losses. You're in.
Sounds like you're describing a disappointing season to me.
Yeah. But you can also say, okay, they went through the first 16 games of the year without a leader because Jermaine wasn't ready for that yet, and Mike that's not his personality to be the vocal guy. And say you're set up. I was talking to somebody the other day. I said, I think this is the best I felt about leadership in the offseason since heading into the Final Four year. Just in terms about consistency coming back. And that's not a knock on Chris Silva, but Chris he had to grow into what he became as a leader. And Frank Booker tried to be that guy, but it's hard to be that guy when you're a grad transfer. You got Jermaine coming back. And that guy is as close to Sindarius Thornwell as you're going to get to Sindarius Thornwell, at least right now.
In terms of the stats, in terms of the mentality.
Like literally everything about him. Yeah. I mean, he's Sindarius Thornwell. And whether he turns into what Sindarius turned into, obviously still remains to be seen. But right now, at the end of their freshman year, like they're mirror images of each other. So you could say, okay, we got, if you're a South Carolina fan, you can say we got our Sindarius Thornwell coming back. We have Keyshawn Bryant coming back. We have Justin Minaya coming back. We have Wildens Levesque, Jalen McCreary, Trey Hannibal, Seventh Woods coming on scholarship. You can see, you could be disappointed with the fact that you're like, well, hell, now we're not going to have any postseason. But you can also say, we have a lot of talent coming back that, I feel good about where this program is stability-wise for the next 2-3 years. And you have to stack some recruiting classes on top of that. But you're allowed to say, well, damn, this sucks that they didn't make the tournament. But beat Kentucky, that buzzer beater was pretty damn cool. You beat Arkansas on the road. That was pretty cool. You beat Virginia on the road, and we beat Clemson. Like, okay.
It's most of the check marks that Carolina fans want to hit in a given season.
Yeah. You pull 2 or 3 upsets. You beat Clemson, and you have a shot for the tournament.
What do you think would have happened? You think Carolina would have lost to Arkansas?
Probably.
Yeah? Especially with Mike not playing?
Yeah, if Mike didn't play now.
So shouldn't we play out our version, our assessment of the end of the season based on the likeliest outcome? Shouldn't we say, yeah, Carolina probably would have lost to Arkansas. They were like 10 hours away from their season ending organically and not having it truncated. And does it being artificially ended by measures to prevent the spread of COVID-19, does that pump artificial optimism into the season?
No. I mean, I still would have been pretty optimistic about things if they had lost to Arkansas. And we never know. I mean, so they would have probably been picked to lose. Arkansas would have probably been favored. But you never know. I mean, I tried to do some game simulators yesterday, and like South Carolina and Arkansas, I simmed it, and the final scores, I'll do it right here. I mean,
Where are you simming this? You don't
game sim.
Okay, you don't have like
No,
EA Sports.
No. So like, it's close, like insanely close. So after simulating now. South Carolina consider the home team. Arkansas consider the away team. There's no home court advantage since it's a neutral court.
Mm-hmm.
It was simulated 242 times, which is okay. Went to overtime 7 times.
Wow.
South Carolina won 119 of those. Arkansas won 123, with an average score of South Carolina 68.2, Arkansas 68.4.
Wow. So a difference of 0.2 points.
Yeah, I mean, so if we're
in 4 games.
If we're talking about simulations here, it's a toss-up. And so while I think if you don't have Mike Kotsar, that changes things. Like South Carolina legitimately had a shot to win that game, and you win that game, and you never know about LSU and who is scuffling, and you just never know. And with the South Carolina team, you and I have talked about it, they've been volatile all year. You don't know what to expect half the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so they could come out and wallop Mississippi State by 15 points. They could go out and lose to, Vanderbilt. Like, you just don't know. So I'm of the opinion that you really can't evaluate without full totality of results, and without the SEC tournament and the NIT, you don't have that.
Okay. So then we can't throw it out, but then this year doesn't mean anything. It's not a feather in Frank's cap or a nail in his coffin.
No. This lives, for those that want to live everything black and white, you can't use this year, because this year lives solely in the gray area. There was good, there was bad. The people that are pro Frank are obviously going to use the top 6. You won 10 games in the SEC. You beat Kentucky, you beat Clemson, you beat Virginia, and the other ones are going to say, well, we didn't make the tournament. We had an uphill battle to do that. We were going to host maybe one game in the NIT. Mm-hmm. And you lost to Stetson and Boston. They're going to use that. The other side's going to use that. It lives solely in the gray area. There's no black, there's no white.
I still haven't decided what to make of it, heads or tails. So I'm not going to commit either way. I don't know if I'll ever really know how to.
No, and that's fine.
And we just don't have any.
I don't think. I mean, Frank's a pretty optimistic guy, despite some of the demeanor he's got. But I think he thinks this is a pretty serious question. I mean, I think he thinks that this is a pretty good season. He's an optimistic guy. He's going to look at the positive on it, and he should. He's the head coach. Mm-hmm. But who knows?
I think it's been cool to see how much the national media have leaned on Don and Frank. I remember immediately after they canceled the SEC tournament, right before Greg Sankey went to the podium in Nashville to make his announcement. They called Frank. Yeah. A beacon of wisdom and perspective. Heath had an interview with him on 107.5 The Game Tuesday evening. And one of Heath's first questions was like, John Calipari had one kind of last hoorah, one last get together with his guys, because a lot of them aren't coming back. Have you thought about that? Have you talked about that for, mostly for Mike, I guess for Mike too, but mostly for Mike, just in terms of one last get together. And Frank was like, haven't even thought about it. He's like, I got my family to worry about. Like, there's so many other things going on. And Frank is, he's just one of the most fun guys to cover, because he's so interesting. Interview. He's so smart. He's so nuanced. And the more not that I know him at all, so I'm not going to say it like that, but the more one gets to know him, the more you see and you understand how much of an act it is in terms of his gruff media personality. Yeah. And it's fun and it's funny and it's interesting. And it's cool. I mean, when we sit here and we cover Frank Martin on a regular basis, and he's the guy that the media goes to in that situation, and he handles it so well. And again, has such good perspective. I think in a season that may ultimately left people pretty divided on how they feel about Frank Martin going into next season, I think those are the kinds of things that are
you have a
tiebreaker.
National presence.
Yeah.
So at the SEC tournament, each coach does a 15-minute availability after their practice. And so Usually it's whoever the beat guys are. So, like, there was somebody from 247, there was somebody from Rivals, and there was somebody from the state there. And so we all went over. And then, like, normally you just get the beat guys and maybe one other reporter or a national guy or somebody. There were, like, 16 people over there for Frank.
Wow.
Because they wanted his opinion on playing with no fans or whatever. And he gives good quotes. And national media, other local media in the SEC want to talk to him because of it. Like, that's just what it is. And same with Dawn. I mean, Dawn is an absolute national presence for vastly different reasons, because she's obviously, at the tip top of her sport and
the Olympic basketball
coach, and arguably, not even arguably, a top 5 coach in women's basketball currently, if not the best women's basketball coach in the sport. So you have 2 national presences in that building that I think, whether you want to argue results or not, sure, you can argue results until you're blue in the face with Frank. Can't really with Dawn. Appreciate that. Appreciate the fact that you have 2 national, attention-getting coaches at South Carolina.
You just hope that Frank catches up to Dawn, because then they're going to have the 2 most popular coaches, for people to listen to, and a couple of winning programs. But
that's why there's a reason why CBS, when South Carolina wasn't in the tournament, wanted Frank in studio. There was a reason why Sports Illustrated, when they were doing their draft show, wanted Frank in studio. Same with Dawn. There's a reason why people want to talk to Dawn. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Even if you don't like the wins, even if you don't like, he yells at players, appreciate that. Appreciate the fact that you have some national attention on your basketball program, which South Carolina, for the most part, has never had. Ever. I mean, very rare. Yeah. The Spurrier days, baseball, but that's a very, very regional thing. It depends on what pocket of the country you're in. Basketball, has never really been that for South Carolina.
Certainly not in our lifetime.
No.
You and I grew up here, and I don't know about you, but I grew up feeling like Columbia, South Carolina was not a basketball town, because no one I knew or liked cared about basketball, because Carolina was bad. Nobody talked about it. It was all football. Obviously, there are no NBA fans here. So I was like, I guess Columbia just doesn't like basketball. And then, I grew up and I started working in this business, and I started talking to people that have been covering Carolina for a long time and have lived in Columbia for a lot longer. And, remember, the BJ Mackey days, which were in our lifetime, but, we were
Let's speak for yourself.
No, you were there. You were born in 96, right?
We're 95.
Yeah, okay. So they won the SEC in 96 or 97,
97
right?
when I was 2.
Yeah, okay. So, you were 1 or 2. I was 3 or 4.
Yeah.
So it happened in our lifetime, but not really. Yeah. And then, of course, way back when they were absolutely dominant with, a bunch of good players, an amazing amount of good players. It's wow, it used to be a basketball town. It's not anymore. And it's still not, but you feel like it's closer to that.
Yeah. And give Frank Martin and Dawn Staley a lot of the credit for it, for building programs that deserve to be talked about.
Yeah. And we don't talk much women's basketball, any women's basketball on this podcast, but let's do that, because we've started talking about Dawn Staley. And yesterday, Wes and Chris and I recorded another Carolina podcast, and we put up just sort of a mailbag thread to see if people had questions. And we did get a couple basketball questions. I promised these guys that I would save them until today, which I'm doing. And USC Beckham wanted to know, in our opinion, how Dawn Staley and South Carolina should handle claiming a national championship, not asking if, but how. And look, we talk about the ambiguity of South Carolina's men's basketball season. That's obviously a lot more up in the air. The women's basketball season is less ambiguous. They were the number 1 team in the country.
Yeah, the consensus.
Yeah, the consensus, the coaches poll, the postseason coaches poll came out a little bit earlier this week, and they were still the number 1 team in the country.
Got
no conversation about it.
30 votes in both.
It's unquestionable.
Landslide.
So in most ways, less ambiguity there. Although when we talked to, who were we talking to? We were talking to Derek Scott, I think, maybe last week. Jay and I were on the halftime show, and I was like, who was it? I don't remember who it was. Doesn't matter. Point is, we were talking, and I said, in some ways, it's not good for South Carolina, because they still would have been the favorites to win the national championship,
right,
and you like your chances, and it would have been a lot better for them to just go ahead and hoist that trophy and win March Madness. And obviously, if all this stuff hadn't been canceled, and I was planning on heading down to New Orleans for the Final Four, so disappointed that I can't make that for entirely selfish reasons.
Yeah, a bevy of reasons.
Yeah. But also, like, Carolina's the number one team in the country. They have a chance to claim a national championship without having to worry about going through the NCAA tournament and, like, risking an upset. In some ways, it's a little bit cleaner. But to answer USC Beckham's question, I'll let you go first because I don't have a good answer. How should they go about claiming that national championship?
I was asked this on our boards the other day, and I thought about it a lot. In any sport, I am not in favor of a team claiming itself national champions.
It has to be given.
Yes. Now, if the NCAA, I don't think they will, or the AP wants to hand out, and say this is the AP national champion for the 2020 season. Yeah, sure. I'll gladly be okay with that. But for a school to do it, I find it a little less. Like, I wouldn't be as on board with that.
Really? But they were the best team in the country.
Yeah, and I don't doubt that. And I think that if you do something, you raise a banner and say 32-1.
Mm-hmm.
You raise a banner saying 32-1 consensus. Consensus number one.
That's
team.
just a lot of words to fit on a banner.
Yeah. So to declare yourself national champion, I'm not a fan of. And that's true with Florida State, who tried to pass state legislation to do it.
And it passed, I think.
Yeah, and so like that, or, Kansas, if they want to do it, I wouldn't be okay with it. And I say all of this not to discredit Dawn. I'm not doing that because what she has built has been dominant. They were dominant this year. They were won 26 straight games, I want to say. They were perfect 16-0. I mean, they cruised
beat 13
through.
ranked teams.
Yeah, I mean, they cruised through everybody. They were going to be the number one seed in the tournament. They were the odds-on favorite to win the national championship. And I think they would have won it. Just being around them even a little bit, even though I don't cover a lot of women's basketball. Without a postseason, it's hard to claim a national champion. It's really, really hard to say you were the best team in the country. Sure, if you want to say best team in the country, you were that. But sometimes, like we've seen in a lot of sports, the best team doesn't always win the national title. There's so much women's basketball, less so than men's. There's so much randomness involved in sports.
At UMBC.
Yeah, at UMBC, at South Carolina for going to the Final Four as a 7 seed. I mean, they were a good team, but if you had talked to anybody at South Carolina or around
anywhere, were they one of the best 4 teams in the country now?
No. There's so much randomness involved that it's really hard to say, well, yeah, just give it to them because Oregon's good, Baylor's good, UConn's good, even the South Carolina beat Baylor and UConn.
And UConn, yeah. Oregon was the only one. It's a shame they didn't play them in the regular season because then they would have had a really legitimate claim.
Yeah.
And maybe would have been consensus number 1 in the AP or in the coaches poll, I guess.
So you just never know.
So you don't want them to claim it?
I'm not. If they claimed it, I get the argument for it. I completely understand the argument for it.
But I also understand where you're coming from. It's like you shouldn't need to claim that,
Yeah.
If you're the best, you can't say that you're the best. Someone has to tell you you're the best.
Yeah. Hang a banner saying consensus number 1 or 32-1 in 2019, 2020.
But don't you feel like,
a banner should get hung. I'm not.
Yeah.
You hang a banner for this season, and you're going to hang an SEC title banner. You're going to hang another SEC tournament title banner. I get that.
But I'm always immediately thinking about legacy. And it's like Dawn Staley has a way to go in terms of just like counting stats, in terms of winning championships to pass Gino.
Yeah.
Obviously, big first step this year in getting her first head-to-head win against Gino. But at some point, like let's say, I don't know, let's say Carolina goes on an incredible run here because there's no reason to think that they won't. And they win.
Yeah, with this core? Yeah.
Let's say they win 5 of the next 7 or 8 national championships or something crazy like that.
Yeah.
And I know Gino's has like 11 or something like that, but you give Dawn 6 and it's like, wow, you're really in the conversation. But at some point, hopefully, it's going to be kind of a conspicuous absence. It's going to be sort of a weird asterisk. And I just hate that for her legacy, that this is probably the best team she's ever had.
And it's not going to win.
Not going to win a national championship.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that should not be held against her historically.
Oh, no.
And I feel like it's going to.
I don't feel like that.
Okay.
I feel like you're going to talk about this in terms of the year that they missed, that everyone kind of looks at it and says, okay, they were at least, if they weren't going to win a national title, like if you had told me, I think South Carolina, I'll preface this by saying South Carolina, I think, was going to win a national title this year. If they didn't win it, they were going to finish number 2. I think they would have been playing Oregon in a national title, and
yeah,
that would have been it. I mean,
it's a safe prediction.
But you can't know for sure, and that's where the ambiguity comes in. Where it's like, what if? I know one seeds rarely lose in the women's tournament until you get to face another number 1 or a number 2, but you never know. What if a player goes out and rolls her ankle and can't play for a game in South Carolina? You just never know, and that's why I'm not in favor of awarding yourself NCAA tournament champions. Because now, if you want to say regular season, whatever, sure, hang a banner. I'm not saying don't hang a banner.
There will be something in their rafters.
Yeah. But to just go ahead and say we were national champions, you can, but Oregon has a claim to it. They lost twice compared to your once. If you were undefeated and no one else was undefeated, you have a better argument.
Stupid Indiana.
But Oregon only lost twice. South Carolina lost once. I understand that, but there's still so much ambiguity that comes from that.
It's weird, and in some ways, probably even harder for the women's basketball team than for the men's.
Yeah.
Crazy, weird. All right, one more question, and this is already sort of transitioning us into a little bit of off-season talk. Like I said, I anticipated we wouldn't necessarily have enough time to go through kind of individual grades and take a closer look at what this season meant for South Carolina. We'll do that next week.
Yeah.
Maybe have an update on AJ Lawson one way or the other. I was laughing earlier when you were listing the players that were coming back because there was a conspicuous absence there, and I know everybody's going to really hyperanalyze that.
That's going to be...
We'll leave that alone for now. One more listener question from Gamecock 2001 wants you, Collyn, because I can't talk about this intelligently. He asks you to talk to Iriel's potential as a fluid, athletic big. Does he look to be a more polished version of Kotsar? Can he ultimately defend like Kotsar did this season? Next question.
Yeah, you never know with these guys. I've really liked, and the coaches really like what Iriel brings. He's got a lot of potential, man. I mean, I saw him play early in his junior year, and I walked away and I was like, there's a lot of room to grow, and he still has a lot to work on. And then I saw him as going into his senior year. I mean, I watched him with Frank, not with Frank, but I was in the same gym with Frank when he was watching him, and he played PJ Hall, who obviously I think he's number 1 or number 2 in the state, top 100 kid, top 70 kid, and went toe-to-toe with him. I mean, blocked a couple of his shots, rebounded the ball. He got strong. I mean, if he continues on this development, how quickly he's gotten better and stronger and turned into a Division I SEC basketball player, you like what you see, and you like the fact that he can come in and maybe play early minutes. I don't know right now. A lot depends on...
Already a crowded front court.
Yeah. A lot will depend on who comes back, how Frank wants to manage it, but could he have kind of a... 5-6 minutes a game his freshman year, same with Javon. I mean, sure. But, I don't think he's beating out Wildens or Jalen for the bulk of the minutes. How about that? But potential by his sophomore, junior, senior year, I think he could be a very, very good player.
So I know the question says as a fluid, athletic, big, more polished version of Kotsar. Is Kotsar even the right comp, or is he closer to Jalen, or is he closer to Wildens or Silva or Carrera?
He's a less energetic Carrera.
A less energetic Carrera? Okay.
Like how Carrera was like, I'm going to jump on everything, and he's not like that. He's a little bit more...
Like in control or like less motor?
In control.
Because Carrera was all motor.
In control. He's a little bit more in control. I don't know. Like, he's not really like, he's more of like your typical back to the basket, rebounding, defense, rim protector, big. Same with Javon Benson.
But is he the same size as Carrera? I thought he was a little bigger.
He's a little bit bigger.
Is he a Sam Muldrow type?
I'm going to pull up his measurables now. So Rivals has him listed at, if my page will load, he's a good player. Very, very good player. 6'9", 225. So your typical four.
Yes, and Carrera was more of a 6'7".
Yeah. He's more of your back to the basket, strong, big, can rebound the ball, can protect the rim, can play really good defense inside, which is what they're losing. So
does he project to have the defensive versatility of Michael Carrera or Mike Kotsar?
Probably not yet. I think you can, if you needed him out there for a moment, sure.
I mean, how are his feet? Is he quick?
Yeah, he's quick. He's still kind of growing into his body. He's gotten a lot stronger, a lot bigger this year, and I think that once they get him on campus and working with him, then he'll really kind of.
Yeah. So what you're saying, I'm picturing Jalen. What's the difference between Ariel's skill set and McCreary's skill set?
Jalen's a little more explosive.
Okay.
But other than that, pretty similar. And Ariel's a little bit bigger. It's a mix between Mike and Jalen. How about that?
Okay.
Less explosive than Jalen, but as probably fundamentally and just skill set wise, Coates are defensively with less versatility.
Okay. Interesting.
Right now. Obviously, I mean, we're talking about Mike as a senior and Jalen is.
Right. And yeah, I mean, if we know anything, I guess the short answer to your question, yes. If he stays 4 years, yes. Because Frank Martin he could turn you into like an all SEC big man, I think.
Yeah. Oof.
I don't know, man.
Oof.
Frank Martin's record as a developer, especially of big men, is pretty sterling. I'd like to see that. Well,
So
that'll be our off-season project. We'll just get Frank Martin to train you.
I like that.
See if you're good enough to like walk onto the team come, October or whenever.
Yeah. I have all of my eligibility left. I know this shocks you, but I have all of my eligibility left.
Yeah, you have to go take a couple like graduate classes, take like archery or something like that. But that's great. I'm glad we arrived at this for some off-season content. This is good. We're also we teased this a little bit earlier in the season. We're definitely going to end up doing a sort of travel log because you have a lot of good stories. You and Chris travel a lot together, have traveled a lot together. We're going to do some of that. Obviously, we're not like quite there yet because we still have a lot to get to in terms of recapping the season. What's going to happen with AJ Lawson? If he stays, what does that mean? If he leaves, where? All those things. We'll get into it. I don't know anything yet. I don't know if you know anything yet. I'm not going to ask you because I want to, maintain some level of like drama and suspense for the listener because I'm cruel.
Yeah, I will say this. He'd be stupid not to test the waters.
Ooh.
He'd be dumb not to. Just the way college basketball works.
Yeah.
I mean, the way that draft process is, they'd be dumb not to put his name in and at least get evaluated.
All right. Colin Taylor giving the listeners something to think about. But we'll be back next week. We'll break down basically everybody's season individually. You've already done a lot of this on Gamecock Central. I mean, you've gone through a lot of what we already did today on Gamecock Central. You mentioned the piece in terms of you mentioned the piece where you went through and you explained sort of the entire process from the team perspective.
Getting home
after unprecedented cancellation of the SEC tournament. If y'all haven't read that on GamecockCentral.com, go read that. You've posted grades for players for the end of the season. We're basically going to expand on that in the podcast next week. Who knows when we'll get some AJ Lawson news and do some other stuff as we still try to figure out exactly how we feel and what it means for the season to end like it has. And then we'll have some travel logs. We're going to have, we're going to keep updating you on Collyn's journey to walking on to the South Carolina basketball team, which is my new favorite offseason project.
He's 6'2", 235-pound power forward.
Yeah. Just back to the basket, get some little. Are you left-handed or right-handed?
Left-handed.
We'll just set you up for some little, righty baby hooks, get some rebounds, block some shots. This is going to be great. But in all seriousness, we're open to suggestions. What do you want to hear us do?
Yeah. I
mean, not even really with the off-season, because I guess it's on us to come up with our own off-season content, but this is such an unusual time. Is there anything...
If you want to hear us talk about, food or...
Yeah, and
like
we'll do
my
some
travel logs or...
movies. Is there like a I don't know. Could we revisit like a previous South Carolina season, or maybe there was like a great player?
If you want to see us play like revisionist history for certain seasons or whatever,
there
we can
are different
along.
things that we can do because it's weird because it's the end of the basketball season anyway. I mean, not exactly because like you said, this would have been March Madness time, but like around this time of year, we're wrapping up the basketball season anyway. And for South Carolina, who knows? The season may have already been over, so we would have been doing this stuff anyway. So it almost doesn't matter from that perspective that it's been canceled because we were already going to be like heading into off-season content. But let us know what y'all think because we value your feedback. You can put it on the thread. You can leave it in a review. And also, while you're leaving a review, go ahead and rate and subscribe to this podcast. Everything else on the Gamecock Central Podcast Network. Got a lot of good stuff. Again, y'all need content because it's boring out there with no sports. So we're going to be creative. We're going to try to keep y'all entertained, informed, everything going on with South Carolina basketball. As I mentioned, Wes and Chris and I did another Carolina podcast yesterday. South Carolina got a 4-star quarterback commit. We talked about that, the implications of the Gamecocks not having spring. And for those of you that are curious about the NFL draft, I know we don't do a ton of pro football stuff on Gamecock Central, but with Javon Kinlaw projected to be a top 10 pick, we're going to be talking to Will Helms here over the course of the next couple weeks to get a little more in-depth breakdown of Javon Kinlaw's draft stock and his version of, I think it's going to be a mock draft. I don't know exactly what form it's going to take, but Will Helms watches a lot of tape, loves analytics, so we're going to get his takes on Javon Kinlaw and a lot of other guys that are going to go in the NFL draft, which is April 23rd, I think is when that starts, and that's closed to the public. So, yeah, maybe. Who knows? It's still planning on happening, just closed to the public, but obviously a lot of things up in the air right now with COVID-19 still making its way through the country. So with that, y'all stay safe and subscribe to the Gamecock Central Podcast Network. Rate, review, all that stuff. So many things to do. Rate, review, subscribe to the podcast.
Stay safe.
Stay healthy. Stay safe. Sleep. Drink water. Spend time outside, but not in large groups.
Check on your parents. Check on your grandparents. Check on whoever you need to check on that's at risk for this.
Yeah. Be good.
Yeah.
And above all, thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you next week.